thanks so much for joining me today. It's great to have you. You've had such a spectacular career and we've all watched you from the sidelines. So I'm going to start by asking you a very difficult question. What were the turning points in your career and the milestones that got you where you are?
I think there have been quite a few, Minnie. I was talking with a young group of students just a few days ago, and they asked me a similar question. And they said, how tough is it for women to rise in their careers, etc. And what I said to them, I think, is something which I've reflected on a lot. I think in India, women have quite a level playing field. Certainly in urban areas, people who are educated, we're not really discriminated against when you start your career. But the turning points come when, as a woman, there are points in your life when you want to make a decision about should you be with the children, should you be with an ailing parent, should you carry on with your career. So one important turning point in my life was when I had my first child, when I had my daughter. And I was very fortunate to be supported by both my mother and my mother-in-law. Because, children need not just quality of time, they need quantity of time as well. And the family support I had allowed me to continue my career. And I would say that we in India are quite fortunate because we have families, we have help. That's a big thing. But you also need supportive bosses. And I was very fortunate to have an enlightened boss who allowed me to work flexible time. And between the help that I got from my mother-in-law, and the flexibility offered in my career, that was, something that allowed me to continue. Another very important turning point in my life was when I moved from investment banking into operations. And at the time, I really didn't want to do it. I had made a proposal to my head office in the Netherlands to say, India is changing. It was just after Y2K. And I made the proposition that we should do global processing for ABN AMRO Bank in India. And everyone said they will never agree. European unions are very tough. The Americans are more amenable to this. To my surprise, they were very enthusiastic. They said, yes, absolutely, go ahead. We sanction everything you've asked for, but you have to run it. And I have to say, I was really shocked by that because I had thought of myself always as an investment banker. I was doing well. And I said, no, I'm not an operations person. And I almost left the bank at that time. And my husband, who was a very, very sensible person, he said to me, were you born an investment banker? So I said, no, what do you mean? And he said, well, you've always said you want to do something for your country. What better thing can you do than to create more jobs? There's so many young people who need jobs. And that was a real turning point. So I took on that challenge. I set up this company, which at that time we called ACES. And I really loved it. It was like my third child. It's grown to be a wonderful global company. We now have 15,000 people. We processed for ABN AMRO globally, other banks, then RBS. It's really a jewel of a company with wonderful, hardworking people. They stand as ambassadors for India everywhere in the world, doing very high quality work. And then I think the other very major turning point in my life was when I decided to give up banking and take a step into public life. I kind of did it in two steps. In 2009, I stood for election as an independent, and it was a great learning experience. Once again, I was very fortunate to be supported not just by my family, but also by my organization. I'd actually handed in my resignation, and my boss said, are you sure you're going to win? And I said, well, this is an Indian election. Chances are quite loaded against me. And he said, well, then don't resign. Take a sabbatical. Go and fight. If you win, you step down. And if you don't, we are very happy to have you with us. And that was an extraordinarily generous gesture because it kind of allowed me to take a very big step. And then when I lost, give me time to reflect on my learnings, to prepare for the next time. And I knew that this is something I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And so I spent those 5 years, of course, with the bank. They were quite turbulent years for our bank, as you know. The financial crisis had affected us. But also to gear myself up for understanding what role I could play and what I could bring to public life. And in 2013, I stepped down from the bank and gave up that, part of my life to serve my country.
I've always been curious, somebody like you or Nandan, who's done corporate life, been very entrepreneurial and gone into the hurly-burly of politics. I mean, they're two different worlds. So before I ask you about that, I'm going to ask you a question. Who were your role models? Because, as you went along, you obviously shifted gears a couple of times. So who did you look up to, or at different times did you have different role models?
I think I've had many role models, for all of us, our personal inspiration, I think, always comes from home. And so, very much my father, who was a naval officer, as we were growing up, he was a very idealistic person, as many people in the services are. And he always told my brother and me that we should travel the world, we should study, we should work abroad, which both of us did, but that we must come back and serve our country. And I remember as a little girl always wondering, what is it that I can do to serve my country? Of course, in those days, the armed forces was not an option. I'm delighted that the Indian Navy has just a few days ago allowed women to have a permanent commission. And of course, that's a wonderful career, but it was not the choice I made. And I had, of course, gone into banking, and that also with, private and foreign banks. So it was always in the back of my mind that there is something that our generation needs to do to give back to our country. I'm not saying everyone should join politics, but that was a great inspiration for me. Within the banking world, a lady who was a great inspiration for me was Tarjani Vakil. I think she blazed the trail for many of us. As I said, I believe we, especially women in banking, have had quite a level playing field. There are many of us, who've succeeded in our careers without, the gender issue coming into play. But when I hear what Tarjani went through, she describes going in for board meetings where she's asked to sit outside because someone thought she was a secretary. She's a very gracious lady, and I think women like her certainly broke the glass ceiling for people like us. Within politics, I think there are many role models I've had. One of the people I've admired greatly, of course, has been Hillary Clinton. You know that I'm on her council. And I do hope she has a good chance for this presidential election. But also ladies like Aung San Suu Kyi, Margaret Thatcher. I think there are many examples of women who have entered public service and brought a different aspect to the political domain than perhaps men would do. And so I would say, across family, banking, and politics, I have had different role models.
So I was asking you about the ingredients of success. What does it take to succeed? Is there a common theme that you have seen?
Yes, I certainly think there is. Certainly hard work is a very important ingredient for success. Humility is an important ingredient for success. And I think teamwork is a very important ingredient for success. We live in a very complex world, Mini. If you look at all the variables and how fast technology is progressing and all the problems that you have, for any one person to be able to manage all of that is extremely complex. I think truly successful leaders build good teams around them. And not just good teams, diverse teams. The more diverse your team, diversity of gender, diversity of age, of experience, of different abilities, different people bring different experiences and knowledge to the table. And I think success in today's world really is going to be dependent on the teams you build around you and the diversity of experience, because then you have a better chance of making sense of this very complex world.
You've been part of banking from very early, ANZ Grindlays, I think, then ABN AMRO, RBS. How has banking evolved, Meera? And what are the new challenges any young professional coming into banking faces? Because technology is really transforming everything, isn't it?
It really is. I was sharing with my daughter just a short while ago. I said, when we started banking, it was entirely manual. I remember sitting there, totaling up ledgers. And we were trained to do basic banking, So you looked for where were the areas that you could do fraud. You looked at dead and dormant accounts. You looked at nostro vostros. You looked at suspense accounts. I think no young banker that I know today actually even pays attention to these things. You know, कहते हैं computer में चला गया. Once computer में चला गया, बाहर क्या आता है किसी को पता नहीं है. But that is the way things have evolved. So banking has become far more automated. It's become more marketing driven. A lot of young bankers are not bankers in the traditional sense, or looking at the financial aspects or credit and risk and things like that. They're looking at what product can we sell the customer. And unfortunately, I think there's some mis-selling also which is going on. So in the entire gamut of banking, I think the basic thing which we have lost sight of, which we saw in the financial crisis as well, is that we moved from being custodians of people's money to being sellers of product. And I think that has been not so good a shift. I met a lady once and she said, I think of my money. When I think of my money, I think of a nest and I think of a little egg in it. I've worked really hard to save that money and I'm giving it to you as a bank, and I need you to look after it with that same care as you would look after, a little egg in a nest. I thought that was a really beautiful metaphor. I think in the global banking system, what we have lost sight of is that relationship, that we are custodians and guardians of someone's money. And we have, it's become very sophisticated, you're doing trading, you're doing sexy products. But having lost sight of that, I think it's one of the reasons that banks have lost a lot of trust and credibility across the board. We need to regain that.
I want to come to the other hat that you wear as a citizen politician. I think that's how you would like to be described also. How have you seen politics change, Meera? You were part of the first wave of regular people who walked into politics, and you were also part of the second wave, I think, of the coming together of a lot of people to form a citizen movement, which is really up. Of course, what happened to it is a separate conversation we'll have. But what do you think when you look at this changing face of politics?
Well, Minnie, in 2009, when I decided to take the step to stand for elections as an independent, other than my friends and family and people who were slightly positively inclined, everyone thought I was completely crazy because it was such an unusual thing to do. And I think in many ways, though I lost that election, I think it was the start of something. I think a few of us who took the step at that time, there was Malika, there was Anil Bhatia, we were kind of the outliers at that time. I think we all felt that there's no sense in sitting and complaining and criticizing and analyzing. As Indians, all of us are very good at that. But the time was coming for us to do something about it. For me, the trigger, of course, was the 26/11 attacks, where I just felt that things were not going right. The state was not doing the job it needed to do. And I'd done a lot of work in our microfinance program, which we had in the bank. And I came really to the conclusion that Indians are very hardworking, very entrepreneurial, very innovative, very honest people. But that our leadership was failing us. This is a country which has every potential in the world, But we are just not at that stage. And we have so much talent. You see Indians doing well everywhere, either in enterprise or in corporations. We have really talented people. But in India, these people are not coming into the governance level. And unless you have good governance, you will not have a country progressing. And so I said, let me try. And everyone said, you will fail. And I said, well, it's still worth the effort. Because whether I win or not, maybe someday someone like me will win. And Minnie, in those years, between 2009 and 2014, the one reason I knew I had done the right thing was I started getting thousands of letters, emails, people writing in from all over the country, saying, Meera, we would like to do what you've done. Tell us how we can succeed. And I remember just writing back and saying, look, I didn't succeed. So I don't know what I can tell you, except that just do it. Just try, because someone like you will. And then when I met Arvind Kejriwal, it was at a very interesting, it was a Thai event where it was called Political Entrepreneurship in India. They'd invited Arvind, they'd invited me, they'd invited R.K. Mishra, who was from Lead India, and Chief Election Commissioner Qureshi Saab was there. It was a really interesting meeting of young entrepreneurs, really wanting a new India, not tied to the vested interests and the cronies of the past, wanting India to succeed with a level playing field. And I remember saying to them, I said, look, whatever you do, let's support Arvind. That was the first Delhi election was coming up. And I'd never met him before. And I said, really, you must do it. Because what I know is that people like us can stand for elections. But what we need to know is, can people like us win? Can you win without money power, without muscle power, without bribery, corruption, without being the son or daughter of a politician? Can you as an ordinary common person, as an aam aurat and an aam aadmi, can you win? And I believe that Delhi election was a game changer. It changed something in India forever, I think what the Aam Aadmi Party did, whatever your political affiliations, I think everyone will agree that we raised the bar for what we expect from our politicians and we lowered the barriers for entry. Right? I think Indian politics changed forever and for the better because other political parties are now beginning to evaluate their candidates. We are talking about RTI, we're talking about transparency in political funding. Maybe we're not there as yet, but we are getting there. And that's very, very important.
In life, there's a tendency to look at successes, Meera. I'm going to ask you, is there a mistake that you learned from? A mistake that you made where you said, it probably added up to a lot more later?
Well, as I said, these young students, they asked me, they said, what are your failures? I've had 2 spectacular failures. I've, lost 2 elections. And I think it's a great learning. As I said, certainly in 2009, what I learned is that we need independent thought in Indian politics. That's very important. But to fight as an independent is very difficult because, imagine the odds. In my constituency in South Bombay, 1.7 million people in 2009. That's enormous. I got my election symbol 12, 13 days before the actual elections. So the odds are really loaded against you. And therefore, it is important to join a political party. The question is, which political party does one join? And everyone said to me, they said, don't be so idealistic. Inko join kar lo, unko join kar lo. Once you get elected, then you can make changes. The one thing I've learned, and I've seen this in these elections, is that it doesn't work out that way. Whichever party you join, you need to submerge yourself in that ideology. I think even the leaders of these parties, and I will not take names, know how difficult it is to change the ideology of their party. Maybe they wish something, but the party wo apne tar se jata hai. These are old establishments. So, as an individual, you've got to make a very, very careful choice. And I do believe, Minnie, I think politics matters. The one thing that I would like to say to everyone watching this show is that as a citizen, you don't have to join politics, but you must be involved in it. Whether it's at the local level, in your building society, or in your corporate level, in your ward level, politics matters. It really affects every aspect of our life. So vote and hold the person whom you voted for accountable. I mean, there are lots of people who voted for me in both elections. And I went out this time and I said, all right, because I lost the last election. So what am I going to do in these next 5 years? Everywhere I went, people said, "Aap to is baar aaye ho, 5 saal ke baad nazar aoge." And I said, no. I make you a commitment that these are the 10 things I'm going to do, whether I'm elected or not. And the day after the election, really on the 17th of May, when we got the results, I started work on my agenda. As you know, I've been, very involved with the Portlands, and I'm absolutely delighted that after literally a year and a half of work, a few days ago, a big battle that we were fighting, which was against these coal mountains, the coal dumping which is happening here, the Mumbai Port Trust has just issued a public notice that they're going to stop the dumping of coal.
So you're saying that the failures, irrespective of the failures, that you have gone on, and that's an important message in itself.
Absolutely.
Okay. What has the role of education been in your career, Meera? Because, one thing that also stands clear is that you've cleaned the slate and started a number of times. So how have you skilled yourself for this? How important is education and constant learning being in that?
I think it's absolutely critical, Minnie. And today, in today's world, we have so many tools and techniques to train ourselves. So, being an armed forces child, I think there are many of us who, if you come from an armed forces background, you learn very quickly to land on your feet because you change many schools. Sometimes you're in the middle of something, the course is different, you have new friends. I think that was a great experience. There was no time to say, oh God, 5 years ago I was doing this. You just jumped in and you started work. I was very happy in school. I mean, I changed many schools and I enjoyed all of them. They were all very nice schools. I spent a brief time, I did 1 year by correspondence. My father was posted abroad. I did that by correspondence. So I know how distance learning works. I studied here in Bombay and Sydenham. I did a brief time in IIM Calcutta. Then I went to France to study. So one of the things I learned is actually you learn more from your peers sometimes than the classroom. It's the diversity of the students you are with that you learn a lot from, and the network that you have. You continue learning from them. You remain in touch. But what I also found is that there is so much you can do on your own. For me in banking, we had to give a banking exam. So I chose to do the Chartered Institute of Banking exam. And I found this, when you self-learn, you really learn. I learned my banking on the shop floor, but also by actually studying the Banking Regulation Act. And it's important. If you know the laws, then you can actually do a better job. And then as a mother, I found teaching my kids, there were big gaps in my education because I kept doing from school to school. So a big gap in my education was trigonometry. I mean, I cleared the exams, but I never really got taught it because I was moving at that time. So my son said, he, got trigonometry, and we don't believe in tuitions in our family. So he said, will you teach me? And I said, oops, I don't know much of it myself. So we went on to Khan Academy, which is a great resource. And in that few hours, I learned all the trigonometry that I've ever learned in my life. And my son learned a lot, and he aced his exam. And it just shows you what a lot of potential there is with the technology that we have today. And I believe this can be a game changer for India. It can really be a game changer.
When you see young professionals coming into the banking sector, these days most of them are coming from an engineering background because it's engineering, management, and then banking and finance. What are the gaps that you see? What is the need gap in terms of getting them to understand the nuances of banking?
Look, Meera, I think one of the problems, and I'll step back from banking, I think one of the problems with the way we are hiring people these days is it's become very cookie cutter. So we look for the best institutions, assuming the best students are going in there. And with the greatest of respect, I don't think you need someone with an IIT, IIM qualification to be a banker. I think it's what all of us do. We all go for, day one placement and day two placement, and these are very, very bright children. There's no doubt about it. But have they been trained to do banking? When you are in an airline, have you been trained to what is specific for the airline? I think we need to now move to more skill-based training. And that's something which I believe is going to be a generational shift. One of the most exciting things that I think is happening in education is these MOOCs, these massive online open courses, where today, sitting in any part of the world, you can draw on education from the best universities in the world, whether it is Harvard or Cambridge or Stanford or the Indian School of Business here. I mean, people are now offering world-class education at your doorstep for something that is specific for you. For example, I'm now quite interested in what's happening in the healthcare business or in financial empowerment of women. And you see the superlative courses being offered in urban, I've become now, urban planning is my passion in terms of what's happening. Really fantastic courses, Minnie. And I think we are now entering a kind of a different Gurukul kind of system. That one-on-one learning which you used to get from your guru, you can now get that one-on-one learning from the best guru in the world in the field of your interest. And that, as I said, will be transformative for India. Insofar as banking is concerned, I really believe that everyone entering banking should give the banking exams, either the Indian Institute of Bankers or the Chartered Institute of Bankers, because an understanding of the banking relationships as a customer, what are your duties as a bank, as a clearing bank, are very, very important. How do you secure a mortgage, for example? We talk of NPAs in banks, right? Why are we in this situation? What was the credit risk analysis you did? I just heard of an amazing story which I could hardly fathom. One of our best banks, and I'm now just not going to name the things, took as security from a company which has spectacularly failed. I just need to be very careful of what I say. The brand of the thing which has failed rather than the core brand. Okay? And it was an airline. The airline had the brand of a core product, but the airline brand was worthless because the airline had failed. And therefore you have no security, and we're talking of hundreds of crores, right? What were the people who were giving this loan thinking? This is 101 of banking. Are we training our people in this? And the answer is no. And in that, I think we as management may have failed our staff. But young bankers, you want to do banking, then this is what it is.
So how can online really benefit in that? Because I think at different stages of banking, you need different inputs really. And especially with technology changing, with platforms changing, with payment banks coming in and, the whole wallets and the whole piece coming, how can youngsters keep abreast and what can online do there?
Well, to be quite honest, I don't know that we've actually, at the moment in India, got a whole series of online banking courses. But I think we do need certifications. I think, we should now enter the world, rather than saying, okay, have you got an MBA degree, to say, have you got the specific skills for what we want you to do, right? So have you got skills in credit rating? Have you got skills in, creating simulations in terms of risk analysis? I mean, banking is getting to be a very sophisticated business, right? So you need different skills. You need actuarial skills, you need risk skills, you need marketing skills, you need all kinds of things. So I believe you need a general understanding. We need to have, it's like your general knowledge. And then you need specific skills, whether it's in trading or risk or credit or whatever it might be. I think we need to develop that. I believe, what is now happening, and this has happened through the National Skill Development Council over a period of time, is that there is a lot of effort going into skilling in specific vocational areas. And I believe banking is as specific a vocational area as politics is, as carpentry is. I mean, all of these require very specific skills. It's now time for Indian entrepreneurs to enter this domain and offer very, very specific courses. The other thing which we really lack, Mini, is practical application. We're very good as Indians with theory. I think we need a combination of theory and practice. Do something, with your hands online in a work environment, and then you're certified. And personally, I believe industry should start valuing these certifications as highly, if not more highly, than the traditional MBAs and things like that.
UpGrad is trying to do a lot of this. What's your message for UpGrad? How can it really be effective?
Look, more strength to your elbow, I would say, really. And Ronnie's, he's really an entrepreneur in the truest sense of the word. So let's use technology to give people the tools to be successful in their business. I think that's really what it is. And also link up with industry. I think it needs to be a partnership, because I could have the best degrees in the world, but if I haven't had the chance to apply it, I'll never be able to cement my learning. So I wish them the very best of luck.
Two last questions. First is, what's your message for the youth? I know a large part of your effort as a politician has been to really get the youth up and going, So, and we are demographically rich in that context. So what is your message for the youth?
I really believe that we are in good hands. This millennial generation, they value things differently from us, Mini. I think they have a much greater value for the environment. They have a much greater value for ethics. Our generation was a little bit material. We were all after the next better job and the next better house and the next better car. I think this generation values money. It's not as if they don't. They value that. But they want to spend it in the way that they believe is right. And so I really think that if our generation can hold for the next 20 years then when this generation comes, they will absolutely do the right things. Because some of the choices we have made over these last 20 or 30 years have been bad for our country, have been bad for the planet. So I would encourage this generation to get in there, to participate. Don't lose hope. A lot of people are getting very cynical, not just the young people. All of us are getting cynical. I think there's nothing to be cynical about. There's a lot of hope. Just go out and do it.
Last question on work-life balance. It is the traditional definition of work-life balance, Meera, is getting time with your family and getting time to do what you're doing and being successful at that. But if you broaden the definition to really opening your mind to influences, how have you managed that? Because I think your career is a great example of really opening your mind to the possibilities. And to what would your advice for youngsters be?
Well, I think youngsters can probably advise us better. They get it really much better than us. But what I would say is just keep an open mind. Certainly for women, Minnie, it is an issue. I think everyone who says that you can be the perfect mother and the perfect wife and the perfect, corporate honcho is stretching it a bit. For me, what I decided was at some point that I was happy being an average mom, an average wife, an average person at work, because I liked doing all of that. I loved my kids, I loved my home, I loved my work. And at a certain point, I said, I'm not going to feel guilty and I'm not going to beat myself up about it. I'll just simply do my best and have fun. And I think that's a good way to go. But I also feel in terms of when you say, we're work-life balance, we have every possibility today. I mean, it's really a third wave world. This was one of my favorite books, Alvin Toffler. We have the means, our generation has the means to do practically anything. So let's do it. Let's be open to all of that and have a good time. Enjoy yourself with what you do. Without
which you can't be successful as well. Thank you so much, Meera.
Thanks, Minnie.
Thank you. That was lovely. Thank you so much.